July has always felt different to me, as though it is a month in which something is hiding. In the early morning, the great stacks sometimes stand deep beyond the cornfields. Most of their bodies remain hidden among the tall green stalks, and only their magnificent antlers rise above the field. For a few moments they appear like ancient guardians, silent, watchful, and almost unreal, before disappearing again into the landscape. I remember as a little girl spending hours watching the butterflies in this garden. They always seemed to arrive at almost exactly the same time the roses began to bloom. One day the garden would still be waiting, the buds tightly closed and their colors hidden. Then the first petals would open and suddenly the butterflies were there. I never questioned how they knew. As a child, I simply accepted that the garden was speaking to them. And perhaps it was. Day butterflies belong to the light. They move between flowers as though carrying invisible messages, touching the earth only lightly and arriving without sound. Yet when evening comes, they seem to vanish. They disappear among the leaves, into the branches, or somewhere beyond where our eyes can follow. It has now been almost a year since I moved back to my childhood home. But coming home has become something much deeper than a practical decision. It has felt like stepping back into an unfinished story. When this house was built in 1979, everything surrounding it was bare ground. There were no great trees, no hidden corners, no old roses bending beneath the weight of their flowers, and no birds nesting in branches that had not yet grown. My parents began with young trees, small plants, seeds, and a vision of something they might never live long enough to see fully formed. That is the extraordinary thing about planting a garden. You are always planting into the future. You place something fragile into the earth and trust that time will continue the work. You trust the rain, the seasons, and the sunlight. You trust that life will grow beyond you. Perhaps this is why a garden matters more than ever. In these challenging times, it becomes a place where the earth quietly asks each of us a simple question. Have you remembered how to care for life? Because the future will not be shaped by what we build alone, but by what we choose to nurture. Today I walk beneath trees that were once small enough for my father to hold in his hands. Their roots now reach beneath the lawn, while their branches shelter birds, insects, and countless small lives that were not here when the first spade entered the soil. What began as bare earth has become a living world. And now I find myself continuing what my parents began. I'm not trying to replace it or make it entirely my own. I'm learning to listen to it. A garden of this age must be approached with respect. Before changing anything, you have to observe where the light falls, where the soil holds water, which plants are thriving and which are fading. You notice where the birds prefer to rest, and where the butterflies gather when the afternoon becomes warm. A garden will tell you what it needs, but it rarely shouts. It speaks through small signs. A yellowing leaf, a branch without new growth, a rose turning towards the light, or a sudden gathering of bees around a flower that almost went unnoticed. To care for a garden is to become a listener. Among the things I'm continuing here is my father's work with the stones. He placed them throughout the garden with a quiet sense of form, direction, and meaning. Many years later, I find myself drawn to the same work. I move among the stones, study their positions, watch where the sun rises, and notice where the moon appears between the trees. I think about direction, alignment, and the ancient knowledge of the stars. Perhaps in separating from nature, we also began to lose one another. Human beings have always built upon what was already here. Every path follows older footsteps. Every idea grows from earlier questions, and every generation inherits an unfinished world. Yet in our hunger for progress, we often replace before we understand. We forget that we inherit not only knowledge and dreams, but also wounds, responsibilities, and the work of lives we will never know. None of us begins from nothing. Somewhere along the way, we also forgot how to live within the greater pattern of life. We lit the night until the stars disappeared, measured time more precisely, moved faster, and consumed more. And in gaining speed, we lost direction. Nature became something outside us, a resource, a backdrop, a place to visit, rather than the living system to which we belong. We are connected to the whole world, yet often disconnected from our bodies, the seasons, and the living world outside our windows. We created convenience, but not always peace. Still, something within us remembers. We feel it beside the sea, beneath an old tree, or in the need to plant and protect something living. Because we do not simply belong to nature, we are nature. Air crosses borders, birds ignore our maps. The moon moves oceans, trees communicate beneath the soil. Nothing exists alone. Connection is not just a beautiful idea. We are not standing at the beginning of the story. We have arrived in the middle of something ancient, a world shaped by forgotten lives, lost knowledge, and cycles far greater than the modern mind understands. We feel it when species vanish, seasons shift, soils weaken, and the silence of missing insects becomes impossible to ignore. Our role was never to dominate these patterns. It was to recognize them, listen to them, and become conscious participants in the living intelligence around us once again. This is what I feel when I stand here in my childhood garden, among the stones my father placed, beneath the trees my parents planted, and beside the roses I brought with me from another chapter of my life. The past and the present are not separate here. They grow together. Their roots meet beneath the surface. The stones continue their silent conversation with the sky, and the roses open as they always have. Among them, the yellow rose and the red rose carry different messages. The yellow rose seems to hold sunlight within its petals. It speaks of friendship, warmth, and the quiet love found in ordinary acts. Bringing tea, watering a plant, listening, and helping carry what has become too heavy. The red rose speaks of passion, devotion, and memory. It reminds us that love is not always gentle. It can transform us, wound us, strengthen us, and remain long after everything else has changed. Its thorns do not make it less beautiful. They are part of its truth. Perhaps we also grow thorns around our most delicate places, not because we lack love, but because we know how deeply it can affect us. Together the yellow and red roses carry two forms of love: the love that steadies us and the love that awakens us. Neither tries to become the other. Each unfolds according to its own nature. Perhaps humanity could learn something from that. We do not need to become the same in order to recognize our connection. A forest is not strong because every tree is identical. It is strong because different forms of life support one another. Diversity is not the opposite of unity. It is the way unity expresses itself in the living world. July reveals all of this if we are willing to look. The rose opening, the butterfly arriving, the stag standing beyond the cornfield, the stars waiting behind the daylight, and the stone remaining still while generations pass around it. Everything appears separate, yet everything belongs to a larger movement. The earth has never stopped speaking, the stars have never stopped aligning, the old patterns have never stopped moving around and through us. It was we who became too distracted to notice. So the next time you see a butterfly appear among the roses, do not hurry past it. The next time antlers rise above a distant field, stop for a moment. The next time you stand beside an old tree or place your hand upon a stone, allow yourself to listen. We are always continuing something, a story, a garden, a question, a pattern begun long before we arrived. Perhaps everyone should have a garden to tend, something living to care for, something fragile enough to remind us that life does not survive through force, but through attention. The smallest leaves teach us this. They ask for light, water, patience, and the quiet presence of someone who notices when they begin to fade. And perhaps in the end the earth itself is the garden placed in all our hands. Its forests, rivers, animals, soils, and one another. We did not plant this garden. We arrived within it. And one day we will leave it behind for hands we will never meet. So the question is not whether we are changing the earth. We are. The question is what kind of gardeners we have chosen to become. Those who take until nothing remains, or those who finally understand that every living thing placed in our care is part of the future, because perhaps the true measure of humanity will not be what we managed to build above the earth, but how much life was still growing when we were gone. For in the end, the earth is not only our home, it is the living garden of which we, too, are only one fragile leaf. Until the next message from me and nature, stay kind and shine your light.